All right, hello everyone. It's now Tuesday, February 23rd, and today's reading in our Lenten study is 1 Samuel, chapters 3 and 4. Now, where we left off last time, there had been the woman Hannah who was childless. She was blessed with a child, Samuel, who she had reached an agreement with God to surrender this child to the work of God, and Samuel was being raised by the high priest Eli. And now we come to today's reading in chapter number 3. Samuel, he's there living under the tutelage of the high priest Levi, and Samuel is doing well. Meanwhile, Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who are priests, are living as renegades, and this is very much a problem. Eli is blind, and so he's living a pretty sedentary life. Meanwhile, Samuel is still young, relatively young. Samuel is going to hear someone call for him, and 3 times, he's going to assume that it is Eli. Remember, Eli is unable to see. He's likely calling Samuel for help frequently. But each time, Samuel learns that it is not Eli that's calling him. Eventually, Eli catches on and encourages Samuel that God is the one who's calling to speak to him. So, Samuel opens his ears to God, and you might recall in yesterday's reading, there had been an anonymous prophet who prophesied the fall of Eli's house because of the characteristics of the priesthood at that time. Eli was letting his sons, Hophni and Phinehas, steal part of the sacrifices, the meat from the sacrifices. Well, God tells Samuel the same thing that the prophet had informed them in the previous chapter, that Eli's house is going to fall. And Eli, remember, knew that God was talking to Samuel. And Eli wants to know what God was telling Samuel. And so if you're Samuel, how do you tell Eli? Your house is going to fall. You and your sons. Why? Because you've been letting them live like renegades. So then we move into chapter number 4. And Samuel has not only told Eli about this message that God has given him, but he's telling all of Israel as well, anyone who will listen or hearing about this. So it happens that it's time to go to war with their arch nemesis, the Philistines. And so they're going to have an initial battle, and Israel is going to suffer defeat in this battle. It says 4,000 men died on the battle lines. Now, just to paint a picture of comparison, and so as the Hebrews recorded the trauma of their situation and calculated it to be 4,000 men to have died. At Gettysburg, there were 3,100 fatalities. On 9/11, there were fewer than 4,000 fatalities. So, to the Hebrews here, this is a significant loss in this initial battle with the Philistines. So they've got to assess where they went wrong, and they realize they come to the conclusion that the appropriate response is going to bring out the Ark of God, the Ark of Covenant. This piece of furniture resides in the tabernacle, In the innermost layer, the Holy of Holies, that only the priest was able to enter into, not any time he desired, but it was only on occasion that the priest could go inside the Holy of Holies. This was the Holy of Holies was the core of Jewish culture, religion, and all of society. And this ark, what it represented was the throne of God, the very presence of God. So this was the most tangible asset they had. And their thinking was, if they could bring it out to battle with them, it would serve as a good luck charm. Well, initially, it appears that it may be that good luck charm. The people, the camp of the Hebrews are excited. They began to shout and yell. The Philistines are intimidated. They're hearing the noise come out of the Hebrew camp. It almost makes me think of the way history records the rebel yell, and how some of the Union soldiers described the rebel yell. It was quite intimidating. And the Philistines have become intimidated by the Hebrews' yell at this point. The Philistines are assuming they are going to lose, but it turns out that this was a false hope for the Hebrews. 4,000 died in the first battle, and the way they record it is 30,000 die here in this second battle. So it's more than 7 times the fatality rate. If the first battle was painful and detrimental, this second battle is off the charts. Just for a comparison, these 30,000 who died, that's comparable to the U.S. fatalities of the Korean War, also called the Forgotten War. Now, as the chapter reaches the conclusion here in chapter 4, included among the fatalities that day were the priests Hophni and Phinehas, who had escorted the ark out to battle. So a messenger, a Benjamite, returns to Shiloh, where the tabernacle was, where the priests were, and informs them of the magnitude of this military defeat, the loss of the 2 priests, Hophni and Phinehas. The entire community is going to shout out and begin to mourn publicly. Remember, this was community-based society, as my regular audiences often hear me assert. And so you don't go and grieve privately, you grieve publicly. Eli, who's 98 years old now, we find out, the high priest, he's going to hear the crowd, the town began to shout out in grief. He goes to find out what has happened, and he's heard both of his sons have died in battle. And furthermore, the ark has been captured by the Philistines, and that was perhaps more unbearable than his own son's suffering calamity. He falls off of his chair and he breaks his neck, ending a 40-year career as a judge of Israel. And then it turns to Eli's daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas. She hears that her husband has died, that her brother-in-law has died, and that her father-in-law has died. Well, she's carrying a child, and don't you know, she goes into labor. But she's not going to survive this delivery process. My audiences have heard me talk about labor and delivery in the ancient world many times, but it was, just to sum it up, it was all too common that either mother or child or neither would survive in the labor delivery process. However, before she gives way to her demise, she's able to name the child, it's a son, named Ichabod, meaning the glory has departed. the most sacred symbol of their covenant with God, the Ark of God, the Ark of the Covenant, is gone. And so they realize the social, cultural, political, and spiritual ramifications of this. And so here in this honor-shame kind of culture, this child has been named the name of a shameful one because of his ill fate of being born in the wrong place and the wrong time, and his name and his presence will always be synonymously situated with, at this point, likely the worst day of Hebrew history to this point. So, in conclusion, when we opened up this book, there was a woman who was childless named Hannah, but she's blessed with a son, Samuel. And now here is a woman who falls under the would-be curse, as it were, and in her childbearing, she's not able to survive. And her son is not blessed as Samuel is, but carries the name of the cursed. And so, with that, I will meet you again tomorrow.